Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the live show of Ref the District. I'm Nathan Perry. That's the Stoner. Trev is taking some time for himself. If you're watching this, Trev, we love you. And make sure everyone sends out some good vibes to our man, Trev. Wishing you come back soon and healthy. It is going to be a great show here for 136. You're on Ref the District. We, of course, stream live every Wednesday on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Then you can catch us wherever your podcasts are found, thanks to the Believe Network. They believe in people who believe in themselves, and it's good times there. Make sure wherever you're at that you make sure you download all the auto download, listen to those episodes. Every view, every listen matters. Gonna have a good one here as we're gonna be talking about Ron Rivera opening up his mouth again in the cool down and our thoughts on that one. We got the new 53 Stoner. These guys are going to go 17-0 until I find out otherwise. And we got a new practice squad. A couple different topics to throw in here as well. Jason Wright going on 106.7 The Fan, talking about the Redskins moniker. You got Youngin, the governor out in Virginia, wanting to talk about the stadium. So those things will be here in the warm-up. Brought to you by Don't Sleep Energy.
Love them.
That's right. Don'tSleepEnergy.com. Head out there, use the code REFTHEDISTRICT, get yourself a discount on all their wonderful products. We love those sugar-free drinks. We know we've been shipping out a few to some of our friends because they are awesome. We do appreciate Don't Sleep Energy, the official energy drink for the Ref the District podcast. Love those guys and love their products. Don't Sleep Energy bringing you your warm-up here because you got to start the time off right. You got to start off with a lot of high energy here, and you got to start off with a proper practice squad. Owner.
Yep.
Washington Commanders signed the following players to the practice squad. Tackle Alex Akinbulu.
Is that how you say it?
And we're going to go with it.
I always looked at it and said Akinbulu, but Akinbulu Gubu is cool. What'd you say?
Akinbulu.
Akinbulu. I like it. Okay.
AA, another tackle there, developmental guy. Kashmir Allen finding his way on the practice squad. A lot of people were thinking he was going to make the 53. We'll talk about him a little bit more. Another guy that you specifically thought was going to make it, Alex Arma, is right there, tight end fullback. William Bradley King, familiar name, former late round pick, kind of, sticking around the roster here, not making the initial 53. Mason Brooks, my early pick for the District Diamond, finds his way onto the practice squad. Terrell Burgess, Tariq Castro Fields, Jake Fromm. You can see in the image here, he did make the practice squad. Derek Gore, DeJohn Harris. Jared Jones-Smith, tackle. Nolan Laufenberg, center. Benning Potato is here. Bryson Tremaine, who I thought had a really good outing in preseason. He is a taller guy out of Stanford. And, one of the ones they brought in, they liked him as an undrafted free agent. He's here on the practice squad. And Nick Whiteside, the second, is here. And then there's one more. Who I would love to talk about. We already got people in the chat, Patriot Clips, talking about this one. I love the Jabril Cox pickup, hoping he's 100% now and can contribute this season. That's from Patriot Clips if you're listening to audio format. I also like this one. This is a linebacker who Washington picked up from Dallas. If that sounds anywhere near familiar, it's because Washington picked up one John Ridgeway from Dallas last year. One was off waivers, got him, took him off the hands of our division rival. Jabril Cox is a little different, though, Stoner.
Yeah. Well, Jabril Cox is a guy who was released from the Cowboys and had an opportunity. They wanted him back on their practice squad. And he said, you know what? I'm done here. I'm going to go try to find somewhere else. And he decided to come to Washington. My theory is pretty simple, is that him or his agent looked at the depth chart, the linebacker depth chart here in Washington, and says, you know what? I got a shot to play more over there than I did than the shot that I have in Dallas. So I'm going to go over and get on their practice squad and hopefully move my way up. So I think it's a pretty good signing. This is a fourth rounder from just a couple of years ago that played with LSU, so he's a stud. He has trouble stopping the run. That's not his specialty. So we'll see if he can improve on that. And of course, his health, his Patriot clips noted there that hopefully now he's 100% healthy. But we'll see what happens. Let's not get crazy and say, okay, this is a guy who's going to come in and take backup or even starter minutes right away. So let's just kind of be patient, see how it plays out.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of buzz coming around him. So he started his college career at North Dakota State, moved on, like you said, to LSU as a graduate transfer in 2020.
Yep.
And really looked pretty good. Got himself drafted in the fourth round, as you mentioned, 115th overall. So just outside that top 100 range that we talk about all the time is about being impact players. How much of a liability is stopping the run for a linebacker, though?
Oh, I mean, that's their number one priority. Now, of course, this is a passing league now, and you'll even see in Washington where they're going to play a lot of just one linebacker sets. As Ron even said, he's only keeping 4 linebackers because they barely play that base 4-3. They usually play a 5-2-4 or a 5-1-5. So it's not as big as it used to be. That's the whole devalue of that linebacker position, is that they're not these run stuffers that they used to be. There are guys who need to be out in space covering these stud tight ends, these running backs out of the backfield more and more, these crossing routes. The schemes on offense are so good, they need athletes in the linebacker position nowadays, not so much as run stuffers, but of course you still have to be able to do that as well.
Yeah. Current depth chart is not set in stone, but you got Jamin Davis and Cody Barton as your 1 and 2, David Mayo and Kalike Hudson as your 3rd and 4. Where would you line up Mayo and Hudson? Because if Cox is going to be working his way up the depth chart from practice squad, whose spot is he taking from Hudson and Mayo?
Yeah, I don't think anybody. There's a reason that he's on a practice squad. There's a reason he wasn't claimed off of waivers. There's a reason he was released by Dallas, because he's not necessarily a top line starter at this point. Maybe he can work his way into that, like I said, but right now he's not. So he's not taking minutes from any of those guys at this point. It's probably going to take an injury. It's probably going to take ineffective play for a certain amount of time before he moves up.
All right, fair enough. I will point out there are players who get cut every year who do make efficient starters on teams, but I can see where we're going to have to wait for Jabril Cox to kind of work his way into the system. I know if Trev were here, he would be telling us he's got to be able to replace Miracle Whip at some point in time. No, so Ron, I'm gonna pitch that one for you, Trev.
Yeah, Ron loves Mayo. He just does. He's a gel kind of guy. David Mayo is. He's a leadership guy. He's a guy that Ron can depend on to be there and to be in the right place. He's not going to make flashy plays or anything. That's why he's a backup. But he is a guy that's dependable, and Ron is going to stick with his guy. So that's why he's here. It's not because he's some great linebacker, but it's because Ron trusts him and Ron likes him, and he's in the right spot.
Yeah, the name the name is slipping me right now, Stone. All right, so maybe you'll have to help me. There was an older veteran who Ron brought in at linebacker who Mayo reminds me of, because he was very smart player. Mayo, so was
Thomas Davis,
probably Thomas Davis here. Yeah,
from Carolina, sure,
smart player.
Yep,
he knew where he needed to be. He was just a step slow.
Yeah, it's exactly right.
And that's what Mayo brings, right?
That's Mayo. And so you know that Jabril Cox has more athleticism, is a better athlete, but he's probably not as dependable as a guy like Mayo.
Freelances probably once too many times, right?
Yeah. Again, there's a reason he was available to be signed to your practice squad, not to your 53. There was a reason. But it is interesting, I think, that of all the guys that got released within this week, when they went from 90 to 53, which we did the math, or somebody did the math, it was like 1,105 guys or something that got released. And the amount of guys who got claimed, I don't know what that number is, but I know the percentage was 2%.
Yeah, I'd seen the full list. The full list is not even 2 full pages.
Right.
Yeah, and it is a very, very small list there of people who got cut and then went to the waivers and got picked up on the waivers.
Right.
Before I get to more of our 15 that we signed, the 16th, you can have 16 players. Jabril Cox does make up the 16th there.
Right.
And there's going to be still some fluid movement here. We'll talk more about how the 53 has already seen some changes during the game. I want to talk about this practice squad and maybe a name that some people were expecting to be there that isn't there, and that's Jarrett Patterson. He was probably the number one player we heard about this week when he was cut. That was the fan favorite. He's a local kid. He's got a lot of heart. And when he plays, he just plays.
He makes plays, right?
But he's not on the 53. He was on the Monday cuts, and they said those who were cut on Monday are not likely to be put on the practice squad. And sure enough, here we are, Jarrett Patterson not on this list of 16 for Washington. Why is that, Stoner?
Yeah, I don't that is interesting because to the best of my knowledge, he's not on anybody's practice squad. He's just out there with the other 800 and some odd guys who don't have jobs from all these cuts and not on practice squads either. I'm just making up a number. I have no idea what it is. It's probably like 500. But still, he doesn't have any job. And my theory has always been with Jarrett Patterson and why he wanted to get released is because he does have the talent, and he's just kind of tired of the going up and down from the practice squad, back and forth. Is he going to be contributing? Is he going to play? Is he going to get cut again and again? And he's just kind of tired of that. And he felt that he had the talent to latch on with another team. Now, it hasn't happened yet, but it doesn't mean that it won't.
Sure. It took Samaje Perine. That's a running back we had here in Washington. It took him a few years to latch on.
Yeah.
He ends up in the Super Bowl with Cincinnati.
Sure.
Bruce Glass pointing out Patterson's still available. He's still out there. I think he's going to land somewhere.
It's 100%.
It's probably going to be on somebody's practice squad at first. He's going to have to work his way up. I don't think he's going to get signed straight to 53, but I know that was one that people wanted to talk about. Roger seems to be on the more clear-minded side. It might get me in trouble, but Roger, it doesn't do us any good. It's time to move on from Jag players, just another guy players. Get some dogs. That's what Dallas does. They don't waste time with garbage players. Now, I imagine that was towards Patterson, but it could have been to Jabril Cox. But it is Tommy T bringing it up. There's going to be opportunities for him to play and showcase his talents. Patterson, DC defenders might be one of those. As you mentioned, he has talent. We see it when he's playing. He does things. He's an exciting player to watch. You saw that in Buffalo. We've seen that here in the last couple of years in Washington. So that was just the one I want to highlight because I do not really think out of all the cuts Washington made and then building this practice squad, was there anybody else who stood out that did not make the practice squad that you were like, whoa, I thought that guy would have made this?
In terms of guys who were
Washington cut. Yeah, Washington cut. And then, they didn't sign to the practice squad.
No, I don't think so. I think all the guys. Yeah. Oh. But also, I think with Jarrett Patterson, this is just my theory as well. It's kind of along the same lines as Taylor Heineke. Okay. And hear me out on this, is that Taylor Heineke was always that guy that the team turned to when they were desperate. And he always did his job. He wasn't great at it, but he did what he could. So every time Ron needed somebody to step up from the very beginning in that playoff game at the very end of the year, and then the playoff game. And then when Fitzpatrick got hurt, he turned to Heineke. When Wentz got hurt, he turned to Heineke. And every time he keeps turning to Heineke, and Heineke helps him out. And by the end, they wanted Heineke to come back again to be Howell's backup. And Heineke was just kind of fed up. He was like, I'm going somewhere else where I got a chance to actually start because you don't appreciate me. And that's kind of what I think with Jarrett Patterson. Every time somebody got hurt and you needed to move a running back up, I was there and I was dependable. I never did anything to hurt the team. And I was dependable and I never complained. And now he's finally like, I'm tired of this. You keep drafting running backs. You've drafted running backs 3 consecutive years when I'm sitting right here. So let me go. I'm not going to sign back on the practice squad. I'm going to go somewhere else. That's just my theory.
It could be. And like I said, we wish him the best. Let's get back to the guys who are actually on this roster.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see Mason Brooks there. Derek Gore was the running back that one, and I thought that he did fairly well in the preseason.
Sure.
Jonathan Williams looked like he had the inside track to that 4th running back spot, which doesn't really exist. But
right.
In this roster, they're only keeping 3 right now in the 53.
Yeah.
So I thought Jonathan Williams was the 4th running back. I do think Derek Gore was number 5 and Jarrett Patterson was 6. And you kind of saw that. And I think, and I mentioned this before, Jarrett Patterson, I think, saw that. He you could hear it in his conversations that he was having with media when he was being asked questions. He knew his stance or his place on this roster. And so he talked about being kind of one of those with those one of the 31 other teams. But to the credit of the guys ahead of Jarrett Patterson, we're big JFP fans here in this house. As I'm making sure I shout out to EP, even if she also has to eat crow. I had to eat crow. You had to eat crow. EP having to eat crow. I think owes Gregory $1 for not making the 53. But to give credit to where credit's due, Jonathan Williams and Derek Gore were doing the things asked of them, and they were showing out when it was their time. So it's not like Jarrett Patterson. I don't think he necessarily got the same amount of touches, but the guys who got touches ahead of him didn't show any signs of wanting to give that up. And Derek Gore, I think, is excellent. Jonathan Williams obviously ending on in IR. Again, did we find out what happened to him, Stoner? I haven't heard anything.
No, specifically the injury. No, I did not hear the specific injury to Jonathan Williams, but he's on season-ending IR. Although I did hear rumblings, though, that they are going to do a buyout. Now, if you do an injury buyout, I believe he can sign on to another team. Yeah, he won't come here, but he'll sign on to another team. So all right, that probably makes some sense. He probably also wants to get his place. One of the ones that kind of stood out to me was Castro Fields. This is a guy who came to the team last year. With Wild Goose. Wild Goose was the one who ends up getting the spot. Castro Fields, I believe, had an injury. Someone correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But now we're seeing Castro Fields. Wild Goose is gone. He's not sticking around. And Castro Fields at least made the practice squad. What do you make of that young guy? Because this is somebody who I think a lot of people were excited about last year, coming from the 49er system. People thought pretty highly of him. He ends up not making the team over Wild Goose, and then now all of a sudden he makes the practice squad this year. Yeah, that's a position that they only kept. What did they keep? Just the 4 guys, just the 4 starters at corner. Is that right? If I'm not mistaken, 5.
5. So there's 9 total. They listed Quan Martin as a safety.
Right. So 4 then. So just well, that
4th.
Doesn't make sense. Yeah. So Danny Johnson being the 4th. Right. Okay. So that means that guys like Castro Fields and Whiteside is another guy. And did they keep another one? I think that's it. But those are a couple of guys that are probably going to be called on at some point during the season because you have injury-prone type corners.
Let me make sure I correct ourselves before someone gets in there and chat on the correction. Looking at the roster here, so it's 5 and 5. Forbes, St. Juice, Fuller, Holmes, and Danny Johnson. We're forgetting about Christian Holmes. Quan Martin, Derek Forrest, Cam Curl, Percy Butler, and Jeremy Reeves as the safeties. So it's 5 and 5. Yeah.
So the important thing, though, of course, there is that they need to have these guys that they can count on. And so there's a couple of guys with Whiteside and Castro Fields that obviously proved to the team that they're good enough to be available when the team needs them, whether it's because of injury or poor play in the secondary. They're going to be able to call on him. So he is an interesting guy. Like you said, he has some experience, and they did bring him back onto the practice squad. I just know this, that if Castro Fields is in the game, we're in trouble.
It doesn't bode well. It doesn't bode well. We kind of saw some of that in preseason. You can tell he is actively behind those other players there.
Yep.
The conversation in the chat right now is about the quality of linebacker play. Yeah. Only Dejon Harris makes it. Obviously Jabril Cox. Only linebackers in there. We talked about why that is, right? This is a team that doesn't use 3 linebacker sets very often, if at all. Most of the time when we see them have 3 linebackers, it's in quotation marks, as they more than likely are bringing down or using one of their safeties in that spot.
Yep.
Like
let's get Quan Martin being
like Quan Martins and everybody. Yeah. Yep. So I just wanted to address that because I saw that conversation being very active there.
Yeah.
Let's go to the wide receivers that made it. Kashmir Allen and Bryson Tremaine.
Yeah.
Kashmir Allen obviously was brought on to, test the limits and see whether or not he can be a practice squad guy. I think that he actively was not good at the wide receiver position.
Correct. Yep.
So even though I think that he brings some kind of flair as a return specialist, didn't bring enough at the wide receiver. Tremaine being very much a developmental guy, taller wide receiver, but maybe not nearly as polished as some of those above him. What are your takes on those two?
Yeah, Kashmir Allen is a very intriguing guy. I think he started off pretty hot in the OTAs and then into the early part of training camp. He was somebody people were keeping an eye on because he has explosiveness. And that's something that we haven't had in our return game in a few years, basically since Steven Sims Jr. left, when Sims was not fumbling the ball all over the place. But he didn't do anything. He didn't do enough to impress from the punt return position to be able to say we can keep a specialist back there, because as a route runner, as a wide receiver, as a guy who's trying to catch the ball, he's got a long way to go. That's what everybody says. He needs to develop. He needs to work on all that. And you just can't right now. You just can't keep a guy just because he has potential to break a touchdown. Yeah. Some of the stats we put out about Dax Milne, who of course did make the team and is going to be the punt returner at this point, is that there were 3 punt return touchdowns this past year in the entire NFL. So it's not like he's a guy that's going to go out there and get 2 or 3 a year. He's probably, even if he catches every single one, he's probably not going to get a whole lot of touchdowns.
Sure.
So let's kind of, let him develop as a receiver so that they can use him in that spot as well and not make him take up just a specialist spot.
Sure. The stats you're mentioning on Dax Milne, by the way, I have them pulled up here. He had 40 returns, most in the NFL.
Yep.
Largely thanks to the defense, making those stops there.
Yep.
22 fair catches. That's 4th most.
Yep.
Little surprising there. That means even though he had the most opportunities to fair catch, he was 4th on that list. So it means that I always felt, and it's true, that more than half the time he was fair catching, it felt like more than that. Did it to you, Stoner? It felt like most of the time he was just out there just to fair catch it.
Yeah, and which is okay, I think. I know everybody wants, Deion Sanders back there, or what was the Dante Hall or something, one of these great returners that they want out there. I mean, look, the guy from Cincinnati, right? I can't remember his name. Maybe it's Taylor. I can't remember specifically.
Yeah, Taylor, who he got cut.
Yeah, exactly. And he had, I think he had one of the returns for a touchdown. He might have led the league in punt return average. They cut him because the value, that's just another one of those things, that the value of a punt returner is so down that the coaches just catch the ball, don't turn it over. I know you're not going to do anything explosive for us, against them, but don't do anything explosive for them in terms of turning the ball over. And so that's why Kashmir Allen is not necessarily on this team, but they see the promise in him. So they're going to try and develop him and that's why they signed him back on the practice squad.
Yeah. So he averaged 7.8 yards per return. That was 12th amongst guys with 25 plus returns. Now, Stoner, do you happen to have how many actual yards it was?
309. It's 309 or 390.
It was just over. I think it was 309. Yeah. And so that's off of, so the 7.8 yards per return is counting those fair catches.
Yeah.
Which is fair. I mean, but when I'm thinking of the return, I'm thinking of those 18 times he actually runs the ball. So that doesn't look nearly as bad when you do it that way, right? That's 17 yards average.
Yep.
Does it this is, I think there's got to be some kind of memory bias here, Stoner, where we're just remembering him never getting anywhere.
Yes.
But when he actually runs, he's getting a 17-yard average here.
No,
granted, he has 0 20-plus yard returns. That's
let me burst your bubble on this, in that those 40 punt returns are not fair catches. That's a separate stat.
Okay.
So your fair catches are fair catches. That doesn't count against yards. It's not a return. 40 is the ones he actually returned. So that he did not.
Okay. So all total, he had 62 opportunities to return.
Right.
40 returns. Okay, so that's where it comes. Because I was sitting there, I was just like, wait a minute. If he has 40 returns, 18 of those. So so he's only fair catching. Dax Milne is only fair catching 1/3 of the time, roughly.
Right. That's right. 20 something out of 60.
And not very explosive. Again, 12th among those with 25 plus returns.
Yeah.
No 20 yard pluses, but that's 7 yards a clip. I mean, that's enough to do something.
Yeah. And again, it kind of just goes back to Kazmir Allen, in that Dax Milne also, not only is he a dependable returner, he is a very dependable wide receiver. Mm-hmm. That's what Kazmir Allen cannot do. And they cannot afford to use a roster spot on your 53. Those spots are so valuable. They cannot use it on a guy who all he does is potentially get you a punt return.
Yeah. There was a lot of times last year that we saw Dax Milne on the field over guys like Cam Sims, over guys like Dimey Brown. And it's largely because where he sits as a wide receiver, he is an inside slot guy. And so if you go 4 wide, you can put him in there and he's going to run the right route.
That's right.
That
and
one's
going to catch the ball.
Interesting.
Yep. And then the other guy, Bryson Tremaine, who I really like, and I think he's 6'4", 215, something like that. And he was fairly impressive in camp. And again, he's a rookie, undrafted free agent. He's got potential, and that's why they're bringing him onto the practice squad to see if they can develop him. I was surprised that Kyrick McGowan didn't get any run at all, either on practice squad or the 53. Now, I don't think he was going to make the 53, but this is a guy who, whenever you saw the receivers working out, when you saw Terry and Jahan and Brian Robinson and Gibson and De'Ami Brown and Sam Howell and Jacoby, Kyrick McGowan was another one of those guys that was there. So he had the effort and he had the attitude. I guess he just doesn't have the talent to break into that group that they didn't even want to bring him back on practice squad too.
Yeah, there's still going to be some mix there. I'm not going to use the word because Tommy T has got a tracker going already. We're at 1, and I don't want to add to that.
What's the word? Fluid?
There we go. That's 2 now. Okay. Tommy T's got us on 2 for that one, as the roster is in flux, we'll say. Let's move on to the last player I'm going to talk about before we move on to Jason Wright's comments and also Stadium in Virginia discussion here, and that is Jake Fromm.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about him here because he made the practice squad vice the 53, even though this conversation, Stoner, largely is, why didn't he make the 53? We know he makes the practice squad because he's the QB3, but why is that not QB3 on the 53?
Yeah, I think at some point he probably will be, but it just totally depends on on the injury situation, the number situation, all of that for during the course of the year. But Jake Fromm was never a guy who wasn't really challenging for that number 2 job. And Jake Fromm was definitely not a guy who was going to get picked up by another team.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't a risk to release him and then figure out where they can fit him in, possibly onto the 53 at some point. The one thing about that we don't see as fans about the whole 53 and practice squad and the whole fluidity of it. I didn't use the word. I used a derivative of the word.
I'm pretty sure that counts as a drink for those participating in the drinking game.
Yeah. But there are situations with guys' contracts. There are these the vested veterans there. We can't see those inner workings of if a guy makes the original 53 or if he doesn't, and how much the team is going to have to pay in bonuses or whatever. There's so much that's why it's never set in stone from right away that here's our 53 and here's our 16 on the practice squad. It's always going to be kind of moving because of those little things. But Jake Fromm is a guy that they like. We talked about it yesterday on the Daily Commanders update that Eric Bieniemy deserves a lot of credit for Jake Fromm because he was horrific the times that we saw him out on the field against Washington. And now he's out there and people are saying, oh, maybe he should be the number 2 instead of Jacoby Brissett, which is crazy talk.
It's amazing what a year or 2 of development does, and also a different offense that you're seeing, because we've seen kind of similar things with Sam Howell. I don't think he's ever should be in the discussion for QB2 this year, but maybe this is a QB2 next year. Likely they'll probably bring on another developmental talent if Sam Howell pops out there. Shout out, by the way, to our man Corey in the chat here on the Warpath. Corey's awesome. Make sure you hit him up on the Warpath on YouTube. Great guy. Lots of fun here. He, by the way, did say your Idity version did count.
My what version?
Your Idity.
I don't know what that version means. You're gonna have to explain that.
No. Just trying to get me to get to number 4. Not gonna happen. Okay. Just like you're not going to hear the Washington Redskins again as the official name for the NFL. Jason Wright jumping on 106.7 The Fan, talking about a lot of great things, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot of good things to come out of that. One, there's standing room only for game 1, and he threw shade to the Arizona fan base. He was like, great. I played for Arizona. They don't travel. This is Washington fans coming back to FedEx Field there. Standing room only. However, he did kind of, I think, irk some of our own fan base. A very vocal group, whether or not they're in the majority or minority. Most likely, I would say the minority, but they're a very vocal group that wants the name to come back. He said directly, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And which is great to be able to at least put that to rest, at least for now. We don't know how long Jason Wright's going to be here. We like Jason Wright. We think he's done a pretty good job considering that his hands were pretty tied and everything, that he may not even be here in a year, and that whole attitude could possibly change. But as of right now, at least for the time being, we can put that whole storyline to rest for the rest of the season. We can focus on football in terms of that. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on off the field as well. But in terms of the name, we knew it wasn't going to happen. We talked about it ad nauseum for the last few months. It's not going back to Redskins until FedEx, and I'm just using FedEx as a placeholder for every corporation out there, until FedEx says we want it to be Redskins, it's not going to be Redskins. And so that's done. I'm glad he was able to put that out there, and it went national as well. So now everybody knows it's not going to be Redskins, and it was never even a possibility.
I agree with Corey, ripping off the Band-Aid here. Right decision, just like you said. And that's why Patriot Clip saying Jason Wright should have waited until we had some wins before he drops that bomb. I like what you added there at the end, right? This gets out ahead of it.
Yeah.
Let's just end this conversation right now. Let's not hear when Washington's 2-0 hey, are they going to be the Redskins? Did you see that Josh Harris was just wearing a burgundy shirt but no logo?
No.
Maybe that's a sign. No, let's just focus on football and let's win. Let's keep this excitement. I do think that some people have turned this, and we're going to talk later about Ron Rivera's comments. We're all supposed to be riding highs right now, and they're finding things to kind of nitpick. And now people are going to be calling for Jason Wright's job because he doesn't like, or he said the Redskins name isn't going to come back. People are going to go after Ron Rivera because he keeps just talking things in the media, which again, we're going to talk about that one later. I wrote down a comment from Cody. So Cody, I will read a paraphrased version of your comment because I liked it for later. So just to keep that in mind, I have that. But I do think that it's the right thing to do. Rip off the Band-Aid. Let's get into having some sports. You mentioned FedEx. That's the current sponsor for the current stadium.
Yeah.
There is, however, some rumblings in Virginia, as AJ Perez had tweeted out today, that Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin scheduled a special session of the General Assembly for next Wednesday, where an amendment to study a new Commander Stadium could be on the budget. Virginia kind of coming in here. Maryland has done its thing. Virginia's now kind of positioning. We're hearing some rumblings on the DC side as far as at least federally things are trying to open up the avenue there. But how big is it right now for this Virginia thing? And do you have any details that might make this simpler? Explain it like I'm 5, Stoner.
About the whole Virginia thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, they have to basically ask the taxpayers for money to be able to do this. So before they can do that, they have to create a bill that says, hey, we want to talk about putting a stadium and where we're going to put it, and then ask for money and all that. So it's a long way from being an issue. However, at least they're talking about it, because for the last year or so, they were not talking about it. And they said it's just not going to happen because of the whole, the other guy who used to be here. I'm not putting a dollar in that.
not putting a dollar in there.
But yeah, so now it's great because Maryland wants, DC wants us, Virginia wants us, and wherever the stadium ends up, you're going to have 1/3 of the fan base is going to be ticked off because it's not in their area.
PCC here, very clearly, and the non-Virginia camp, putting the stadium in Virginia is a loser, awful state. For the record, just in case, don't get mad at me.
Yeah.
PCC 1901. I'm reading his comment or reading their comment here because that's my job.
But also yesterday I happened to be, I was in DC and I took the metro and I went by RFK and I took some video of RFK and everything. And I was just thinking about, man, how great would it be if they took that stadium that's still kind of half there because it's falling apart, if they just tore that down and then rebuilt. And sure, there's all kinds of obstacles. Is there enough space? Is there easy in and easy out? All that stuff. There's a lot of questions to be answered. But DC is where the team belongs. And if they put it at the old RFK site, you'd probably get the Virginia folks and the Maryland folks to say, you know what? If it's not going to be in my state, then I'm okay with it being in DC.
Yeah.
So that would be my vote. I would like it there, but I don't know if they have enough space or infrastructure. So much that has to go right. Political sway. That's another big one.
I think that's the biggest hurdle, honestly, because there is infrastructure there. They had the stadium there for years.
Yeah.
295 is a mess, regardless of what you're going to do in that area. But having the metro literally right there. I mean, the metro is what I don't like about some of the options we've seen for Virginia and Maryland. The metro's like a mile away. I get it. Like, walking's not that bad, especially if you've got a few drinks in you might need to sober up a little bit.
Yeah.
But a mile is not fun to do going to and from the stadium, especially the walks that you have to do. If it's a mile of shops and an experience and everything, that would probably be more welcoming than a mile of let's cross the, 495 bridge and let's move, do things like that. That's not fun.
The one in FedEx right now does have a stop, but like you said, it's not quite a mile, but it's close to that, and it's all uphill if you're going to the stadium. So that walk is quite the walk going up to the stadium. But they can fix that. It doesn't mean that the new stadium has to be on the exact spot that FedEx is. They could build it closer to the metro. Sure. And play in FedEx.
I think they still have 200 acres of land in that area to
tons
play
of area.
With.
Yeah. So who knows? Again, whatever they end up doing, they're still going to tick off a lot of different people, which you're never going to win in these things. Now, also Sunday, I went to the Orioles game, right? And I've been to all the teams around here, stadiums, and all that other stuff, and I can't figure out why FedEx is so hard to get in and out of, because it is right on a massive interstate, and you can come in on one side, you can come in on the other side. There's tons of parking and everything, but they just haven't figured out how to do it right. And when I went to the stadium in Baltimore, which is right downtown, it is also right off the interstate, and I was out of there in less than 5 minutes. It was just zoop right out. And there were 30-something thousand fans. Now, a FedEx game, hopefully, is going to have 60,000 fans. It's going to have double that. But still, I don't know why they can't figure that out, because there is so many ingress and egress spots in FedEx. I don't know. But it just seems like that's an okay place to have a stadium, just because of all the different roads and interstates that are so close. And to me, it's not a location situation, it's a inefficiency of whoever has designed the traffic flow situation.
Yeah, well, we'll probably have an infrastructure podcast another time.
Another day.
We're going to get back into the football. It is going to be the new 53.
Oh, I love the 53.
Right after this message.
The game is brought to you by Pacers Running Stores. Pacers has 5 stores in Northern Virginia and DC. For the best running footwear, apparel, and gear, just stop by or schedule a virtual fitting with the best running experts in the business. Pacers Running exists to help as many people as possible through running. For every run, it's Pacers Running.
Our man, Jay Glenn right here. Don't care what Commanders or Redskins, what they're called, Commanders or Redskins. Let's win some games. That's all that matters. And this new 53 is on the path to 17-0, Stoner.
Ooh.
At least until we find out otherwise. This 53 came out, and I don't think there was too many surprises for it. I'm going to, again, bring up the roster here in front of me, the new 53. There were a couple, right? There was a few surprises here. Curtis Hodges making it.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for switching over there. Mitchell Tinsley making it wide receiver was a little bit surprising.
Yeah.
Any others that stood out to you?
That were surprising. Well, let's see. So offensively, like you said, Curtis Hodges was a surprise. And again, I think there are some that are surprised that were left off, which would be the third quarterback, which would be the fourth running back. But Mitchell Tinsley was definitely a surprise. I think they probably could have snuck him onto the practice squad because, as we saw, not many people got claimed. So I'm not sure that Mitchell Tinsley would have been one of those guys who have been claimed. But apparently he's wide receiver 6 or wide receiver 7. So that was surprising. And then on the offensive line, Trent Scott making it was a surprise to me. And that's probably it, right? Oh, and Tyler Larson not making it. That was probably the more surprising, because I think Trent Scott played fairly well. Yes. He gives you another backup tackle. So you got Cornelius Lucas and Trent Scott out there at tackle. Ricky Stromberg as a flex guard center. Nick Gates is your starting. Wiley and Leno as your starting tackles. Chris Paul, that's a backup guard. Sam Cosme is a guard, starting guard. Same with Sadiq Charles. And so Tyler Larson is one of these guys you're going to want to be able to pull in here to kind of do. But I mean, that's
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah. So probably need that Tyler Larson on there, which is going to happen, by the way, because Fedarian Mathis is being put on the temp IR. The returnable IR as whatever it is.
Yeah, because now that you're in season. So now if you go on the IR, then you can be pulled back at a certain amount of time.
Yes.
So 4 games. It depends. It's like the Chase Young situation. Sure. You designate him for coming back, and then they have so many 3 weeks or whatever it is to actually put him back on the 53. So he's a guy who made the original 53. He's going to go on that injured reserve list, and then they're going to bring Tyler Larson back onto the main 53 to take his spot at some point. I don't know when they're going to officially do that, but that should happen in the next couple of days. But him not making originally, and again, these are the things that we can't see. We had no idea that Mathis was being considered for the injured list. And by putting him on the 53, obviously you're not going to expose him to being released. Yep. So now that they have him on the 53, then they can put him on the IR for a short amount of time and then sign somebody who they had released. And in this case, that's Tyler Larson.
Yeah. So Mathis obviously not going to be practicing today. They did practice. So a few notes from that. Logan Thomas ran individual drills with the teammates. According to Zach Selby, he's running half speed on purpose, as all the other players catching passes during this drill. But it's another positive sign for progress. F.A. Obata didn't practice, walked inside wearing street clothes as players started stretching.
Interesting.
Very, very interesting. Jersey number swap. Byron Pringle switching to number 3. I'm not sure who was wearing 3 before, but now your wide receivers are 1, 2, 3, 4, 15, 17, and 86. I appreciate Mitchell Tinsley for wearing an old school wide receiver number. I love old school wide receiver numbers, but I'm just an old guy. So those were some of the notes I had here to bring along. Ron Rivera did address the media for Logan Thomas and Kendall Fuller. They were at practice. Rivera was pleased with how they looked, saying those days of rest helped them.
Yep, that's big. And I think for Logan Thomas, that's a pretty big deal. That it looks like he's fine, and they took it really slow because they did have him on a little bit of extra time. If he had been, if this had been the regular season, they would have sped up the whole process, but they didn't need to. So that really helps him. And of course, Kendall Fuller, as you said, with those couple of days off there, really helped his knee heal up a little bit, and they were back at practice and looked pretty good today.
Yeah. So that's all the notes for practice that I had. Let's get back to the 53 that most of these guys practice. What was that?
Sorry, a couple more.
You got
one with I mean, of course, McLaurin was not out there, right? He's not practicing right now. He's still not even, I think he's still in a walking boot at this point. Or maybe he might, I don't want to spread that rumor, but he was at one point in that walking boot. And so hopefully he's off of that. And then Chase was out there at individual drills as well. And I asked this yesterday, I still don't understand what's going on with Chase. I still don't know why they won't talk about it. Why is Ron so defensive when one of the beat reporters asked him a question about Chase? And he's just like, we're not talking about Chase. Why not? What are they hiding? Something's going on. Something's going on, Nathan.
I think that there's just some frustration all the way around when it comes with him, where he's not seeing the field. He's not somebody who's contributing. And it's just kind of one of those things, like, he just doesn't want to talk about it because it's not happening right now. There's probably frustrations on both sides, but we don't know because they won't open it up about that.
We're gonna find something that's going on later, at the end of the year, in the off season or whatever. We're gonna find out what's really going on, because it's not something as simple as he's got a stinger and then he's gonna go see the doctor and then we're back to normal, because they just won't talk about it. There's no reason to not talk about it. If you ask about Logan Thomas, guess what? Ron is going to explain to you what's going on with Logan Thomas. If you ask about Kendall Fuller, he's going to answer.
That's why I'm
Kendall
saying
Fuller.
that there's definitely, you're right that there's something more here.
That's all I'm asking.
You're right that there's something more here. But the matter of the fact is we just don't know what it is. So I'm not going to even begin to speculate. If I did, like I said, there's something internally with Ron. I think he is frustrated with that situation where he wants this guy to play and it's just not happening for one reason or another. And that's why he doesn't want to talk about it.
All right.
There's just some things there that you won't, see, with Chase Young nursing that injury. Now F.A. Obata is also in street clothes. That leaves James Smith-Williams, Casey Toohill, Montez Sweat, KJ Henry, and Andre Jones Jr.'s. So 2 rookies making the kind of overloaded defensive end room here.
Yeah.
Were you surprised? We talked about some of the surprises here. This was a little bit of a surprise to me to see so many defensive ends.
Yeah.
And the 2 rookies making it. What can we expect? Because this is one of the things I wanted to talk about, these groups that we see.
Okay.
What can we expect from this defensive end room this season?
Ooh,
now that we know who's the initial 53, what can we expect from them?
Well, it is definitely going to be interesting. Of those 7 guys, you've got 5 veterans that are in the last year of their deal, and you've got 2 draft picks, a 5th rounder and a 7th rounder. So that's going to be super interesting how it kind of plays out over the course of the year, because of Chase being a guy you expect to be a dominant player, because of Montez you expect to be a dominant player, and because these 2 rookies who KJ Henry we barely heard from, and Andre Jones who we heard a lot from in training camp. So how are all these guys going to work together to be like a 7-man rotation during game day? I suspect some of these guys are going to be inactives on game day, probably maybe even 2 of them, maybe the 2 rookies, so that you only have 5 DNs. But now you got the Mathis situation. Mathis is going to be gone at least 4 games. So who's going to take over that other defensive tackle? Now Obata can do that. James Smith-Williams can do that. Or do they want to bring in somebody from the practice squad like a Benning Pateo, somebody like that? Or are they going to bring somebody off of somebody else's team or whatever to bring up, or a free agent who's sitting out there now? It's going to be that Mathis situation is not good. Number 1, because he just can't stay healthy, period. And number 2, because you only kept 4 defensive tackles.
Yeah. So John Ridgway, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Fedarian Mathis. Mathis obviously on injured reserve now.
3.
And Jonathan Allen was, nicked up. If a regular season game, we would see him play, but that's the guy who you want to stay healthy all year long. Him and Deron Payne coming back to wreak havoc there. John Ridgway is going to get a lot of playing time. We talked about this with the Fedarian Mathis pick. And the reason why you do a Fedarian Mathis, pick is because that guy is going to be playing 55% of your defensive snaps.
Right.
That's all going to go on John Ridgway now.
Right.
So John Ridgway kind of showed out, overplayed his 5th round and cut status as he was somebody who Washington picked up off of Dallas' practice squad. But that guy is now going to get a lot of time. John Ridgway better be out there still suplexing players when he's in for Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne. The defensive line, I don't think we should be too concerned about as long as they stay healthy.
Sure. But then that F.A. Obata, who didn't practice today that you mentioned, and we'll have to see how that plays out. You've still got a week and a half until the regular season starts. So let's see how that plays out in terms of he's a guy who can play tackle. So if he's out and Mathis is out, you've got some scrambling to do to find. You got to get a defensive tackle. You can't rely on a KJ Henry to play defensive tackle.
No.
Yeah, you're going to have to go get yourself a real defensive tackle.
Yeah, Tyler Larson going to be taking the 53 spot from Fedarian Mathis. So that means there's still something going to happen, whether or not it's Pateo coming up from the practice squad or signing a more veteran guy. That remains to be seen. So we'll see how that plays out. Let's move on to the linebackers. A couple of people in the chat here are asking us to kind of discuss this linebacker room. I know a lot of people, Roger is in here bashing Marty and Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio, that they don't know how to pick linebackers. I have to say, with the defense that this team runs, I like Cody Barton and Jamin Davis. I'm not ecstatic. They're not thumpers. They're not. I wouldn't put them at Pro Bowl status or one of these guys who's going to get recognition across the league. Yeah. But for what Washington runs here, I think that they're effective. I think Jamin Davis was really starting to come in his own last year. I know that there's legal issues, and we're going to find out more about that, I believe, tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. That's tomorrow, isn't it?
Yeah, and so we'll find out what's going on with that, if he's going to miss time. Kalike Hudson is finally starting to kind of flash. He's always been a tweener. Yeah. Kind of more of a safety linebacker hybrid. Yeah. But that's what this team, again, wants to see. They want to see guys who flash. That's why they pick up a Jabril Cox. Right. They don't necessarily need a run stopper, right? In the sense that other teams need run stoppers. What they need is guys who can run sideline to sideline to stop some of that speed there. And David Mayo, Miracle Whip is who he is. Not excited about him, but like we mentioned, he gets to where he needs to be. Like he knows the playbook. Yeah. And he'll play teams. And so he'll be out there for that. He's just a step slower than everyone else on the field. Yeah, is the bigger issue. What are your thoughts on these linebackers?
Yeah, I think right now we're kind of excited, or we're okay with the linebacker position. I think it's only going to take a few games where we're going to see how the deficiency at linebackers that we have is going to start showing up on this defense. Now, I don't think that they play a 5-1-5 because that's kind of like that's the type of defense they want. I think they play a 5-1-5 because they have such a strong front, those five guys up front. They don't need two linebackers. Sure. It's not something that we say, hey, let's go do a 5-1-5 because that's a better philosophy. They do it because that's the talent that they have.
I was about to say, I think it's a little bit of lack of linebacking talent, those run stoppers, because when they made the switch from the 4-3 to a 5-1-5, it was because they were getting gashed on the run. Sure. The four impressive linemen that they have, if you allow them to get double teamed, there's going to be some holes. And when that running back hit that hole, a linebacker wasn't able to stop them. Yep. So the solution that Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera came up with was, well, fine, we're going to put five guys on the line, and there's no way you're going to beat our guys one-on-one. Yeah. And if you team one of those guys, that means one of these guys is going to get through. Right. And it proved to be pretty effective as that. And plus you add Cam Curl in there, who just is an amazing strong safety, able to get up there into the box and create havoc. Jamin Davis, again, the sideline speed. Cody Barton, we've seen him flash at times hitting these holes. I'd like him to finish.
Hit the right hole.
Hit the right hole. He sees a hole and he gets through there, and then he's just kind of like, which way to go?
Where's the ball here?
Yeah. So we'll have to see some improvement there. But I think with this team is building towards, I like this linebacker group. I've liked Kalike Hudson since he was drafted. Sure. I liked him in that tweener role. And, went back before even Buffalo nickel became such a naughty word because everybody was using it. That was what I really envisioned him as for this team. And it took him longer to develop than I thought it was going to, but it's good to see him around.
Yeah. And he is definitely a guy that can be dependable in that position. If one of the guys in front of him goes down for whatever reason, or is just not producing, they can put him in there. And, but also the guys from the back, as you talked about with the Cam Curls coming up, and it all started with Landon Collins when they finally moved Landon Collins up from the safety position. Then that's when the defense started to improve.
Mhm.
That's the adjustment. It took a little while, but that's the adjustment that Del Rio and Rivera made. They said, we need to bring that safety up to help out. And it worked miracles. And then they've done it ever since. And you've seen what this defense can do when they have the right personnel and in the right style. So now they've got Cam Curl back there doing that. They've got Quan Martin possibly doing that, coming up from the safety position, playing up there, or maybe playing in the slot, whatever. So they have the personnel to run this properly, and that's kind of the way the NFL is going. So you're right. I do like the linebackers for what they are running because of what's in front of them and those 5 defensive tackles and ends that are controlling the line of scrimmage. And it just makes it easier so you don't have to have absolute studs behind them.
Yeah. Whatever happened to Landon Collins?
That's a good question.
I'm looking,
isn't he?
I was about to say, I'm looking at the Giants roster right now.
Yeah.
And I don't see him there.
Yeah, no, I don't think he's there, but he's not anywhere. Did you do like a Google?
I'm
looking.
Bob
Google.
Let's little Google here. What happened to Landon Collins? And I'm just not seeing it. I'm a little surprised that just, I loved him coming out of college.
Sure.
Wanted Washington to get him. Super excited Washington picked him up in free agency. Kind of a sour note how he ended here, although you mentioned he had some flashing when they brought him down into the box.
Mm-hmm.
Then he struggled to kind of get picked up, was on the practice squad for a little bit. Was the backup for the Giants, and now I just don't see him. That's interesting. Sorry, PCC saying he got hurt. I'm sorry to derail the conversation there, but you brought him up because that's kind of again the point of the 5-1-5. Let's get to that second set of 5 there. Kind of a mixture of your cornerbacks and safeties. Let's talk about them as a whole as well. Emmanuel Forbes, Benjamin St-Juste, Kendon Fuller, your top 3.
Yep.
I think these guys are going to show out this year.
As long as they stay healthy, absolutely.
Sure. Always the caveat, right? The caveat there, however you want to say it.
But it's more pronounced because of St-Juste and Fuller's injury history. Sure.
Yeah, Christian Holmes, Danny Johnson, going to be your first guys in there. You'll get Castro Fields coming up from practice squad if one of those guys have to miss time. Quan Martin, Derek Forrest, Cam Curl, Percy Butler, Jeremy Reeves. Percy Butler's had a really good camp.
Yeah.
4th round pick last year. I know a lot of people were excited about him. Derek Forrest kind of came out of nowhere, though.
Was he a
6th round pick was Derek Forrest, and he was injured. So we didn't really know what to expect because he was injured early on in his rookie season.
Mm-hmm.
Comes out his sophomore season and he just looks like a baller, right? Derek Forrest does.
Yep.
So Percy Butler never got the chance. Plus Percy Butler, I think, took a little bit longer to get used to NFL game speed compared to where he was at. But both groups are really good. The safety group, though, I really like. And I know you love yourself some Cam Curl.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts and predictions for this group? Because I think last year, the defensive backs as a whole, namely really the cornerbacks, because I thought the safeties played fairly well last year, to actually pretty darn good last year.
Mm-hmm.
The cornerbacks, though, seemed like a weakness. Washington spends 2 picks to fill up this defensive back room.
Yeah.
I don't feel like it's going to be the weakness of this defense. What say you?
Well, I will say this. The offensively, the position group that is probably the strongest is the defensive tackles, or just say defensive line if you want, and the wide receiver group, right? I'm putting the safety group right up there with the best position group that this team has.
Wow.
With Derek Forrest and Cam Curl as your starters, and the depth of Percy Butler and Jeremy Reeves, when he's out there, man, he makes plays.
Jeremy Reeves
plays, man.
So Jeremy Reeves, I think there's just something about him. We all like him, right?
Yes. Oh, love him.
He is in the same page, though. I'm going to get myself in trouble here.
Uh-oh.
He's in the same page as David Mayo. Okay.
Ooh.
He,
Yeah, you're going to get yourself in trouble.
I'm going to get myself
Keep
in
going.
trouble.
Are you sure you want to keep going?
I'm going to keep going.
Okay.
I like Jeremy Reeves. I think that he deserves the roster spot. I think that he's excellent on special teams.
Obvious.
He is definitely the bottom safety on this list, largely because he's always a step late. He's just that's it. That's why I'm relating him to Mayo in this regard. Is Mayo knows where he's supposed to be, but he's a step late. Jeremy Reeves, I feel like when Jeremy Reeves is the safety playing, I'm not worried. Just like I'm not worried about Mayo.
Yeah,
I do have some concern when the ball is in the air, and I'm like, which is the safety back there? And if it's Jeremy Reeves, I'm like, oh no, we don't have a Sean Taylor right now that's going to cover the entire field, right?
Yeah,
as good as these guys are, Sean Taylor was otherworldly, and he could be on the one side of the field, and the ball's in the air, and he's going to get to where the ball is, and he's going to make contact. Jeremy Reeves could be 15 or 10 yards from where the ball is supposed to land, and he's going to stay 10 yards away from where the ball is going to land.
All right.
I like him. I do.
Right. And he's a great special teams player.
And he's
not a good special teams.
He's a great. I mean, there's a reason why he's an all-pro. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. So I'm not trying to knock him
off
the 53. I'm just, as far as when you're looking at these safeties, to me, the only reason why I put him above Quan Martin right now in the 5 is because of the lack of experience Quan Martin has.
Right. Okay. But of a position group, and we can debate about whether Quan Martin is a safety or a corner. I think he's more of a corner, but that's fine. They list him as a safety.
I just wish Jack Del Rio would pick a spot for the young man. I think it is a lot to learn. Safety, especially the safety that he's playing, right? He is going to be playing a free safety. He has to see the entire field.
Yeah.
And then you put him as a corner, and now he's focused on a third of the field, or he's focused on one dude, right? Yeah. But there's different, that's the communication, the way to play. It's like going from tackle to guard, or rather guard to tackle, right? It's just such a big difference. You're putting a lot on this young guy who's a second-round pick, who, yes, in college, he played all over the field. He's seen kind of those different ways, but in the NFL, you need to be a little bit more of a specialist, because if you're just kind of, I know they love this position flex, and go ahead and, there's another buzzword for you. But it's not going to do him any favors right now. And we've seen some of these players take time to develop from the defensive side, right? And Jamin Davis didn't ball out because they wanted him to do too much.
Yeah.
And now you're going to have Quan Martin, who I think has a lot of talent, that he has. And you can see the flashes. You see how well, like the interception he had was a fluke. The run back was not.
Right. And just being able to grab it, to be there, to grab it, to know where his feet are, to stay in bounds, and then to have the wherewithal to, like you said, to return it. But so let's just, for the sake of this argument, let's count him as a cornerback.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I agree with PCC here. He's going to be playing safety long term.
Okay. So, but of those 4 safeties that we talked about, and if you want to put Jeremy Reeves 4th out of 4, well, that's fine. Somebody's got to be 4th out of 4.
Sure.
Right. And so I think
he's 4 out of 5, but yeah.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. For this argument, we're putting Quan Martin in the cornerback position, but he's 4 out of 4. And that's not bad when it's one of the strongest position groups on the team.
It is strong position group.
That's like saying De'Ami Brown is the 4th out of 4. And De'Ami Brown had an excellent training camp. He hasn't done anything during the course of a regular season, except for the one game where he had 2 catches for 2 touchdowns, but he hasn't done anything else. But saying he's 4th out of 4, you're like, that's pretty good. That 4th guy is pretty good. And that's what I think about Jeremy Reeves being that 4th guy out of a position group that's really good. So the whole thing was just to come to say that I think the safety group is one of, if not the strongest position group on this entire team.
That's pretty big praise. Let's again combine them with the cornerbacks here.
Yeah.
Much maligned last year, all collectively, not the strongest part of this group, which is also saying something because the linebackers exist.
Yeah.
How many interceptions? Remember, this is why they spent picks in the first and second round, was to turn over the ball. How many picks do you think Washington will walk away with?
I don't know. Do you have any, like, give me some context, like what they had last year, or what
I'm pulling that up. I was trying to vamp a little bit. I was hoping you were just
gonna pull it up.
You're gonna talk out your read a little bit for me, but didn't work.
I need some kind of context, because if I say like 27 and then you're like, well, the all-time record is 15, so I don't know where you're going with 27. But I think they got better as the year went along as well. They were getting gashed early, like the Lions were killing them. Even the first game of the year against the Jaguars, they were lighting up this defense, and they were giving up chunk play after chunk play. But they fixed it. They figured some things out, and it became pretty strong. And when guys were healthy, they played extremely well. You remember, wasn't our guy there at the beginning of last year, or am I getting my years mixed up? Wasn't William Jackson the starter last year for 5, 6, 7 games until they had enough?
That was
last
year before.
That was the year before? Who was the second corner last year with Fuller? You just got to remind me of these things, because I can never remember.
Man, has it really only been half a season without William Jackson?
I think Jackson was he got released like halfway through last year.
He did.
And then he went to Pittsburgh
goodness.
And got released. And by the way, he's another guy I think's not even on a team right now. Him and Landon Collins are probably hanging out somewhere. But yeah, so once they kind of figured that out and they got rid of him, then this group really improved. And when Benjamin St. Juste is healthy, this is a different secondary. And now you've got Forbes, who, with all the hype of what he did in college and all of the worrisomeness, whatever the word is, about his weight and his size, he had an excellent training camp. And I think he's going to be a guy that you can count on week in and week out. So now all of a sudden, what was really struggling early last year now has become, again, a strength of the team, is this defensive backfield. And I'm excited about that, because we haven't had, those kind of hopes here in quite a while. So it was William Jackson last year, right?
I'm pretty sure it was. That's a just crazy thing, because that feels like
years ago.
Most interceptions in the season, by the way, 1961, 49 interceptions by the San Diego Chargers. The 2022 Washington Commanders ended the season with 9 interceptions.
Okay, so I will go out on a limb. All right.
Derek Forrest had 4 of those, by the way.
I'm going to say double digits this year.
Double digits? Ooh, not even going to give me a number.
I will go 15.
15? So almost doubling their total from last year. Yeah,
I think so.
Interceptions could be a bit fluky.
They can be, yeah.
I agree with you. I'm going to go straight up doubling. I'm going to go 18. I think that it's just one of those things that I think they're going to find themselves. I believe we've looked at this before. I think the QB slate this year isn't
daunting.
Isn't as daunting. You're going to have whoever Arizona lines up against Washington in week 1. And that's got to be like 4 interceptions right there. So,
they're going to start off with 4.
Yeah, so it's going to be good. By the way, a lot of talk here in the chat.
Yeah.
Bruce Glass saying 15, Michael saying 18. Lots of chat here, because Allison asked, is Fuller washed? Kendall Fuller washed? I don't believe he is. I think that a lot of people, I think he's probably one of the more underrated players Washington has. People love to dog on him, especially because, surprisingly so, I told you Derek Forrest led the team with 4. Second on that list with 3 was Kendall Fuller.
I think weren't 2 of those touchdowns as well pick sixes? I know at least one was in that. What was
now
that?
You got to make me look that up. Now you got to look that up.
I think it was the Dallas game where he almost picked it off, and then the very next play they ran the exact same play.
Two of those are touchdowns.
Yeah, he had 2 pick sixes and he had 3 picks. He's not washed. The thing about cornerbacks is the best in the business, the Jalen Ramseys of the world, And Stephen Gilmore, I guess he's probably not at the top of his game anymore, but the Trayvon Diggs of the world, they get burnt. It happens. But it's the consistency of game in and game out of being able to shut guys down, but you're going to get burnt. Kendall Fuller is going to have games and going to have plays where you're going to go like, oh my gosh, Kendall Fuller's washed, when he's not. It happens. But like in the case of William Jackson last year, it was happening over and over and over. That's when you can say a guy is washed, when the situation with William Jackson. But Kendall Fuller wasn't like that. He wasn't just getting beat every single game in and game out for big plays all the time. So no, I agree. He's what, 28?
Yeah, 28, 29.
Yeah, he's not washed.
He's still young in his prime. Also,
he's not great, but he's not washed.
I mean, I would consider him one of the top 32 cornerbacks in the league, and that's why he's CB1 here. I think he's criminally underrated. I think that a lot of people think that he is more, or he's worse than what he actually is. I mean, you see this in the conversation. A lot of people think that he's washed. I just don't see it.
I don't either.
But I think people have a lot of misconceptions about him because we've talked about this before. People want to put him in at the slot. He is awful in the slot at this time in his career.
Yeah,
he's just not good. He needs to be playing on the outside. I think that he's doing much better now, focusing on the zone. And when there's communication, a lot of those times that people are putting on him, it was miscommunication with the safety. And look, none of those safeties are playing for Washington anymore, right?
That's
a lot of times you were yelling at Kendall Fuller and thinking that he messed up. You can look back at Landon Collins. You can look back at Bobby McCain and be like, dude,
DJ Swearinger.
I don't think they played together, but yeah. But that's a good name as far as the throwbacks there. Let's move along here. Special teams is the same as it was last year. Cameron Cheeseman trying a new snap. Not sure I like it, but we'll see how it goes for us. Joey Sly winning the kicker battle. Tressway getting back to healthy. It is our man Sam Howell who won that QB spot, and Jacoby Brissett's backing him up here. Jake Fromm again on the practice squad. A lot of people thought that with the new rule, you were going to have a QB3 on this roster. Here's the thing. As long as Sam Howell and Jacoby Brissett are healthy, and to start the season, they're healthy, why waste a roster spot on QB3 who's not going to even potentially suit up?
That's right.
And you do that until one of those guys might come out a little bit sore, and then you're like, all right, let's go ahead and add Jake Fromm to the 53 and put somebody else there just in case we need this QB during a game. But you don't need it until they're banged up. A little bit more surprising, only 3 running backs, Brian Robinson, Chris Rodriguez, and Antonio Gibson here for the 3 running backs. I say surprising because this is a team that wants to run the ball.
Not anymore.
You're thinking they're going to air it out?
That was something that they had to say because they didn't have a quarterback that they believed in. And so that was, as we're going to talk about in our last segment, in our cool down segment, that's what Ron does. He says whatever he has to say to appease the media, and they're not going to be running the ball as much as they've talked about over the last 2 years. Nope. You only need those 3 running backs. You're not even going to need those 3. Chris Rodriguez is barely going to see the field.
That's fair. Probably not. Only to spell probably Brian Robinson every now. I think Antonio Gibson's going to see himself definitely solidified as that third down back and that guy who's going to run on occasion, but be out there to catch the thing here. James Bonato, I'll pay you money to never play the wolf howling sound effect ever again. How much we talking about, James?
Yeah.
How much we talking about? We could
put it up.
Yeah, we'll put down a number. We'll do this as like a piano bar thing, right? Where it's just like James puts up $5 for us never to play it again. Someone pays us $6 to play it. He's gonna have to keep kind of coming up there, not to play it. So we'll leave it up there.
Because
James James is saying $5 here. $5 never to play it again. You can put that in super chat. by the way, James. You can actually put your money where your mouth is on this one. Put it up in super chat, and we'll keep it quiet until somebody super chats over you. The third Bruce here. I don't think the third quarterback will be used much until playoff time. It's going to be, again, we're probably, if we see Jake Fromm ever make the 53, it's because Jacoby Brissett or Sam Howell have some sort of lingering type injury. And we've talked about this before, Stoner. Only 3 QBs last year played all of the season.
I think it's a little bit more than that, but it's
not many.
digits. I think it's 8.
It's 8.
The point you're trying to make is that very few quarterbacks go through very few teams go through an entire season using only one quarterback.
Yeah.
So that backup is extremely important. And then, of course, you saw in the playoff game for San Francisco, if they had a third guy, they'd probably been in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I was about to say, I think there's a lot of recency bias here, where a lot of people are thinking of that San Francisco game and they're like, oh, we need to have the QB3. And realistically, you don't need it until you do need it. Maybe I was about to go in a way that maybe isn't PG enough. So I'm going to continue on. I'll let your minds race on how that was. Continuing down the roster, we got our wide receivers. Love this wide receiver room. We mentioned Byron Pringle moving his number to 3. I think that from 1 to 4 now, because I think Diami Brown is ready to take that wide receiver 3 spot. I expect big things from this group this season, especially with a QB who does have an arm and can air it out. What are your expectations on this wide receiver room?
Yeah, I say this every year. I'll be completely transparent here. I hope that I never see Byron Pringle, Dax Milne, and Mitchell Tinsley on the field. I hope I never see them. And that's nothing against them, but the 4 guys in front of them are the guys I want to see play in and play out and making plays for this team. So having said that, I think they're very capable guys. Mm-hmm. No, your number 5 guy, which is Pringle, I like him a lot. I watched him very closely the one day I was at training camp, and plus, of course, all the games and everything you see online. He's excellent. But after that, Dax Milne, again, he's dependable. He'll catch the ball. He'll run the proper routes. He is a very good route runner, and he has excellent hands. He's just not explosive, so he's fine. But Mitchell Tinsley, I'll be honest, I don't want him anywhere near a regular season game ever this season, because either 1, you're in trouble, and then 2, he doesn't have the experience, and I don't want him out there. So
he didn't flash enough for you to throw him out to the wolves here?
No, but I mean, I'll be honest, I'd rather have Kyrick McGowan in a regular season game than Mitchell Tinsley. But Mitchell Tinsley has promise, and he's probably a better athlete and a better route runner and all that than Kyrick McGowan. He just doesn't have the reps. He just doesn't have the experience of a regular season game. So that's why I would be afraid if he's out there in a regular season game. But hopefully he's not. And probably he's not unless we start getting into issues with injuries, which, of course, we're going to have that week 1 with probably McLaurin not being ready in week 1. So you're going to have your number 4 guy is going to be a Byron Pringle. You're going to have your number 3 guy being Diami Brown. So he needs to step up, even if it's against a poor team. So I like this wide receiver room, obviously, a lot. I think it's a little bit top heavy with the top 4 guys.
Yeah, I think 1 to 4 is pretty strong. I think Dax Milne is reliable. Byron Pringle has some promise. You can probably, count on him for maybe 1 or 2 plays, a game where you're probably going to see him for maybe what? How often did Cam Sims see snaps?
Yeah, very little.
So you're only going to see him out there very little. And like I said, Mitchell Tinsley's probably not going to dress most of the time. Mm-hmm. I'm not nearly as concerned if he sees the field as you are. There's definitely a drop off. I'm not saying
massive
a drop off.
Yeah.
But I think it maybe it's kind of like Diami in his rookie season where there might be some flashes there. Some talk about the QBs. I'm going to sidestep the rest of this wide receiver talk and go back to the wide receivers. the QBs a little bit, largely because it's a little bit connected between those two, right? The QB play, the wide receiver play is going to be very dependent on how good Sam Howell is this year. Roger saying you can't have Sam Howell sling it 35, 40 times a game. It's going to be a disaster. And Bruce bringing up that third QB. Yeah. So you're right, Bruce. The third QB has to be on the 53, can't be on the practice squad. But that's still, even though that won't count against them for game day, the 46 that they suit up,
right?
You still have to have him as one of your 53, and they're not going to waste one of their 53 spots on a QB that's they know is going to be inactive. Right. You might as well keep, that seventh defensive end or seventh wide receiver who, if somebody's hamstrings, Curtis Samuel's had some hamstring issues. If his hamstring doesn't feel right before the game, wouldn't you much rather have Mitchell Tinsley, out there to be like, okay, you're suiting up today because Curtis Samuel can't go, than having Jake Fromm, is going to be sitting in street clothes until things go really, really bad. So that's what it is. Back to the Roger point about throwing it up. You said that this isn't going to be a running team anymore.
It's not.
This is going to be a passing team.
Right.
You like 1 through 4. We both think Jahan Dotson's going to have a big time breakout season, especially if Terry McLaurin's missing time with this toe injury. What are your, again, I'm asking you, give me some numbers, Stoner, on this wide receiver group.
The whole group or just Jahan specifically?
Jahan Dotson specifically, whole group kind of collectively.
I think Jahan, obviously it depends on the health of Terry moving forward, but Jahan's just going to have a really good year for a number 2 guy. Think about what the 1s and 2s of these stronger teams like in Philly or in Cincy or other places that just have really strong 1 and 2s. That's what Jahan's going to be. He's going to be a guy who's going to be very close to Terry in all his numbers, and he's going to be higher in some of his numbers. He might have a higher yards per catch. He might have he might have more touchdowns than Terry, but he's going to have a really good year just because he has tons of talent and because Sam has ways of getting him the ball and Bieniemy has designed the offense to do that. So I expect probably Jahan's going to have somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 to 75 catches, and he's going to have close to 1,000 yards, but probably not over that. And then 5 or 6 touchdowns, which is a lot of that stuff is double what he had last year. Of course, he missed 5 games last year, except for the touchdowns, of course, which he had 7, I believe, in his rookie year, which was super impressive. But I think it's going to actually be less than that this year. But the wide receiver group is going to be very good just because Sam, I think, is going to be good. And if you had listened to this show 6 months ago, you'd be shocked if you heard me saying that. But he's going to be actually good because Bieniemy has worked with him well, and he's shown everything that he could possibly show in terms of being a good quarterback. So, yes, I think this wide receiver group is going to be very explosive, including Curtis Samuel. Although he's the forgotten guy in this.
A lot of people are forgetting Curtis Samuel's there. I've been mentioning Diami Brown. I definitely think that Diami Brown's ready to take that 3rd spot, but Curtis Samuel might have something to say about that. My question for you now, Stoner, is does Washington end the season with 2 1,000-yard receivers?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be that prolific. It's going to be very good, but there's too much talent all the way around on the offense to include the running backs. I'm not saying that they're going to throw it 35 times and run it 30 times. It's going to be the opposite. They're still going to run probably more than they throw it, but it's not going to be as heavy as what it was in the last couple of years. They ran it the last couple of years so much because they had to, because their quarterbacks were so bad. It's not like they had these great mauling offensive lines and these great running backs. They did it because they had to. They didn't even average very high in yards per rush. So let's not think that they're going to be running it 45 times a game like they were the last couple of years. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but you know what I mean? They're not going to run it as much as they say they want to, which they said 2 to 1. That's obviously not going to happen.
Moving on to the tight ends, Curtis Hodges, a little bit of a surprise, making the initial 53.
Yep.
We both expect him to end up on the practice squad at some point in the near future. We don't think he makes it to game one unless Logan Thomas has a setback, right? That's the only way Curtis Hodges is going to stay on the game day roster, first game day roster, is if Logan Thomas has a setback. Logan Paulson talks very highly of these tight ends. It's Curtis Hodges, Logan Thomas, Cole Turner, John Bates. I'm a little less enthused about them than our man Logan P. Where do you stand with these four?
Yeah, this is a fine group of tight ends. That's the best way I can put it. There's nothing special there. I don't think Cole Turner is special. I think Cole Turner is a good can be a good tight end. He hasn't done anything.
Capable tight end. Sure.
Right. I don't think he's special. Let's not get carried away with saying that he's some sort of Travis Kelce clone or even a Dallas Goedert. I don't even think he's to that level, but he can be an effective weapon. He can be like Logan Thomas was a couple of years ago. And Logan Thomas can be like Logan Thomas was a couple of years ago, but let's not get carried away with that because he is older and he is a little bit more beat up. And so he's going to have trouble staying healthy for an entire season. But I think they're okay. And Bates, of course, you know what I think about Bates. He's a tight end he's a tackle wearing a tight end's number.
10 offensive linemen on this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's fine. He can catch the ball. He can do the things that you need to do, but stop throwing him tight end screens. That's not.
Oh, please don't throw him a tight end screen. I don't mind when he leaks out and you're hitting him there because he can find the zone. Okay, he's really good about finding the zone,
but that's
largely because who's covering John Bates? But I agree with you. I'm on record saying that Washington is not going to have a 400-yard receiving tight end.
Yeah, you mean one individual.
One individual. Yeah. I think collectively they're going to be just fine.
Yeah.
I think Cole Turner is probably going to finish fairly close to 400. Logan Thomas will probably finish fairly close to 400. But individually, I don't think they're going to do it. And I think you're going to see kind of a mix there with Logan Thomas maybe missing time. That's gonna hurt his chances. Cole Turner is still, when even as big as he is, your 1 and 2 options are Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. And then when you're starting to get to 3rd and 4th options, now you're just going to whoever ended up being open. And Cole Turner might find himself open sometimes, but we've seen him catch passes in the preseason, which vanilla offense. I get it. It's not the same offense we're going to see. He's also been playing a little bit closer to the line than our wide receivers. So, getting 5-yard catches and 10-yard catches, he's going to have to catch a lot of balls to get past 400. And I just don't see it happening because Logan Thomas is going to get his when he's healthy. Bates is going to get the occasional catch just because, again, he'll leak out into open space and you'll be like, why did no one cover this guy? And you're like, oh, that's right. It's John Bates. They thought he was a tackle.
Right.
They probably, can he wear 68? Give him 68 and make it look like he is a tackle. But anyways, that's all fun and games for the tight end group. I do think that they're a solid group, just nothing, I'm not going to put any one of these in the top 10, probably not even top 15 tight ends by the time the season's over.
Yeah. Here's a good question for you that we've addressed before, but you should probably address it again, Nathan. And that, isn't it true that in EB's offense, the tight end is often the primary target, or is that just a Kelce thing?
If you have a guy like Travis Kelce and you're not throwing him the ball, then you do not deserve to be an offensive coordinator in this league.
That's
okay.
Right.
It is very, very, very much just a Kelce thing. If you look at where they were throwing the ball, until Travis Kelce became Travis Kelce, the wide receivers were catching the passes. And then you're like, wait a minute, we have this otherworldly talent at tight end. Let's get him the ball.
That's right.
And that's when you started seeing him get the ball over, like he was really wide receiver 2 and Tyreek Hill was wide receiver 1. But yeah, it's very much a Travis Kelce moniker, and because you do not have not a moniker, but it's definitely a Travis Kelce thing. And if you don't have a Travis Kelce, you're not throwing John Bates the ball the way you're throwing Travis Kelce the ball. Right? It's just not going to happen.
And that's a EB thing in terms of he sees the talent and he designed the offense to go through Travis Kelce and, of course, Tyreek Hill when Tyreek Hill was there. So good on Eric Bieniemy to recognize an otherworldly talent and then say, we got to get this guy the ball 110 times a year because he is such a great talent. So no, it's not EB as a tight ends type offensive coordinator. He designed it that way, or him and Andy Reid designed it that way because they saw the talent.
I'm going to hit Michael's comment after we touch these offensive linemen here. Ricky Stromberg, Nick Gates, Andrew Wiley, Charles Leno Jr., Trent Scott, Chris Paul, Sam Cosme, Sadiq Charles, and Cornelius Lucas. We've talked a little bit about them before. This is a group, Stoner, that I think showed to be a little bit better than what we were thinking. I don't think this, again, is going to be – it's kind of like the tight end group. Not going to be otherworldly. They're going to hold their own. There's going to be some times where we're pulling out our hair thinking, why didn't you block that guy? But they just need to do enough, I think, to support Sam Howell long enough to get a pass off. But I think Eric Bieniemy is more important than who we have on offensive line right now.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. We know this is not a strong group, and we knew that early on in training camp. And then Eric Bieniemy did some things, even in the preseason, to where he started designing things for Sam Howell. He started designing rollouts and quick passes and all that to offset a struggling offensive line early on in training camp. So that's what needs to happen. It's going to be interesting to see as the year goes along when Eric Bieniemy / Sam Howell / the offensive line is getting away with it by doing all these quick plays and all these rollouts, how the defenses are going to adjust to that and force Sam to not be able to have those quick plays and have to, drop back for a 5-7 step drop and look over the defense a little bit more. So that's going to be interesting because we saw the progression. Did we see a progression from the offensive line getting better from the beginning of training camp to the end of training camp? Or did we see Eric Bieniemy designing the offense to help offset a porous offensive line?
I would say it's a mixture of both because I was seeing good pockets, clean pockets for 7-step drops.
Yeah.
Right. And, when I see that, that's good. Right. Sam Howell had time to throw. Sometimes it was good scheming and sometimes it was just good blocking. So I think that's going to be, this is a position I was most worried about position group I was most worried about going into the season. And I think Washington has an average group. I know a lot of people like to dog Charles Leno. Okay. He is an average tackle. There's just nothing, there's no doubt about it. People treat him because he's an average tackle like he shouldn't be in the NFL.
Right. You shouldn't even have a roster spot.
Okay, he's not Trent Williams. Okay, there's one Trent Williams in this entire world.
Yeah.
Okay, I just need a guy who can be reliable, and Charles Leno is that. Now,
but also, before you get to that, Nathan, but also with that is that last year and the last couple of years, Scott Turner was designing 7-step drops, longer developing plays, which exposes your left tackle, especially exposes your offensive line, but certainly it exposes your left tackle to make him look bad because Taylor Heineke's just going way back there and Carson Wentz just standing there 7-step drop. They're going to get murdered back there.
Sure.
And that's why you have to design these quicker plays to offset their inabilities on the offensive line.
Yeah, it is a combined here. We got a super chat, $5 here from our man, Real Progress in Action. Eric Bieniemy is the offensive coordinator, not Scott Turner. These guys will do far more based on scheme and far more based on the system. EB had a say in the tight end group. Again, the tight end group is average. I don't think Eric Bieniemy looked and picked anything unless he's picking Curtis Hodges, right? Because this is a group that was here last year. We were excited for Armani Rogers. I saw that was a name that was picked up in the chat. I also see, I think it was PCC here. I'm going to make sure that I get the right person for this, because I don't want to attribute this one to the wrong person, because this is a hot take, Stoner. PCC says Scott Turner greater than symbol Eric Bieniemy.
Well, how about this? PCC hit the wrong button. He meant to say not
less
greater than, less than.
Yeah,
right?
less than. I hope that's
you.
the case. PCC, you need a comment on that one, because I saw that one and I saw a couple people, like, I mean, kind of PCC doubling down on it, because Allison made some laughing emojis and PCC said we can, with Scott Turner ? PCC, we can laugh about it now because he's gone. Tears turn into laughs. Scott Turner, I believed in Scott Turner, PCC. I really did. I thought that there was some play designs that I really can see what he was trying to do. And it just didn't work out. A lot of the game day planning, a lot of the game day calls, just not good. If Eric Bieniemy is worse than Scott Turner, this team will have a shot at Caleb Williams.
That's right. That
exactly is just right. If he is that bad, if this offense gets any worse than what it was last year, we were 28th in the league.
Yeah,
if
just
any worse than that, then they will. The defense doesn't matter. This will be a team that's going for Caleb Williams here.
If you just look at the offensive rankings for Scott Turner, I mean, he was here for 3 seasons, and he was the offensive coordinator in Carolina for like a half a season, I believe, after Ron got fired, or maybe I don't remember the exact timeline, but he was named like offensive coordinator because he was the quarterback's coach for like half of the season. Just look at the numbers, and you can put it that, and you can say, well, look at the talent that was around him and all. Sure, you can always say all of that anytime. But over the course of his career, Scott Turner has not produced at the rate that Eric Bieniemy has. I mean, it's pretty simple.
Yeah. There's a couple dollar asks in there. I'm not sure what you all want a dollar on, because if the dollar is EB is worse than Scott Turner, I am not saying that. That was PCC. Again, I wanted to make sure I got that right attribution, because that's a wild take.
Yeah, I saw it. You're right. It was
real
PCC.
Progress. Thanks for the $5. The chat that I was going to go to before that was actually from our man Michael, who this is the first roster I feel like, Stoner, that is pretty well built. Like, what are the holes in this roster, do you think?
The holes in this roster are linebacker. That's always been the case for the last few years. So that's your biggest hole. And then I mean, offensive line. We've quieted down the offensive line talk again over the last few weeks, because they did perform so well in those last 2 preseason games, even though they only played a certain amount of time. But I think it's still going to be a problem throughout the year, and hopefully Bieniemy can out-scheme it. But right now, the offensive line is the problem, and that's your biggest hole. Second biggest hole is linebacker.
Yeah, I wonder if I'm just being nitpicky on here. I wouldn't consider those holes. PCC, that's the comment from earlier.
Yeah.
By the way, PCC now saying, I was joking. I was totally joking.
Okay.
We're going to find that comment that I put up there, just because this is the one that I'm interested in here, which is the Michael saying half of this roster will be gone next year. One, I don't think we're going to see that kind of turnover. Two, I think this roster is as well built as we've seen in years. I think that there's several groups that have talented players on them. And I think that the depth is better this year. As far as holes are concerned, I see where you're coming from. And you're not the only one who thinks that that those are the position groups that are the holes. Linebacker and offensive line, Bruce is agreeing with you. I think that though there are deficiencies there, I don't necessarily see a hole. I see an average left tackle. I see a question mark at left guard, but potential.
Question mark equals hole, Nathan.
You're thinking question mark equals hole?
Well, what is a hole? Nobody.
A hole is, we know that what Norwell brings to the table, and we know that's not good, right?
Okay.
Sadiq Charles, I think, has played well. And all the talk is that he has played the best he can. Now, we have to see that in the regular season, and we have to see him stay healthy. If it was Chris Paul, that's another question mark and probably then a hole. But Sadiq Charles, I think, is a question mark with upside.
Okay.
Nick Gates, I think, is going to be a fine center for the team. Sam Cosmi, I think, is going to be an above average guard. And Wiley, I think, will be a capable right tackle. Okay. I don't necessarily see that as whole. Linebackers, I just talked about how I think that this linebacker core is good for what this team is trying to do. I think Cody Barton's going to surprise a lot of people. I think that he's going to lead this team in tackles. I think Jamin Davis has another year underneath his belt where we're going to see this growth. I think that he's also not going to get his 5th-year option picked up. But I think that we're going to see something. Read my mind here.
You're saying this team has no holes.
I didn't necessarily say that.
Well,
but I will say that there's
your absolute weakest positions on the team, which is basically left guard and linebacker, and you're saying those are not holes. So where is your hole? Where are the holes on this team if that's not there?
Again, I think I'm being a little too nitpicky about what a hole means.
Right.
The deficiencies are at offensive line.
Okay.
And I'd put tight end at that, probably even before linebacker.
Okay.
And then I'd probably put defensive end. A true pass rushing end is a hole. That's a hole. That's probably my one thing I dislike about this roster. I like Montez Sweat. I think Chase Young, if he is ever to come back from the stinger, could potentially wreak havoc this year.
Okay.
There's not a true menace at edge rusher. I think Montez Sweat will probably end up with double-digit sacks. We'll probably re-sign him if he does. But there's not a game wrecker there at edge, largely because they're spending money on the inside. But that's the hole that I would say that's on this roster.
Do you realize what you just said? If I'm going to summarize.
Go ahead.
If you look at it
doesn't have to make sense.
It doesn't. Let me just preface this by saying what you just said does not make sense. You're saying that this team's only hole this team has is not at left guard, is not at linebacker. The only hole is at edge rusher. Do you realize how insane of a statement that is that you just made?
I get it. It's a hot take, Stoner.
It is the hottest take that this channel has seen in like 3 weeks.
Whereas, don't we have a hot take button? I felt like we had a hot take button.
Do we have a hot take button?
You might have a hot take button, but maybe not. Yeah, that's the biggest hole for me. Is I need a better pass rusher. I need something. But hey, maybe by the end of the season, Stoner. Yeah, I'm just saying I didn't realize what we had at edge. Maybe that's how this.
Yeah, but you're saying it's a hole.
Stoner, stop ruining the segue.
Okay. Oh.
Stop ruining the segue. Maybe by the end of the season, I'm going to be looking at this in 2020 and going, oh, I didn't realize how good these guys were. That's essentially what Ron Rivera said, and we're going to get to that in the cool down.
The cool down is brought to you by Manscaped. Ever since my Nathan started using their products, I can't cool down. Fellas, trust me. Go to Manscaped right now and get 20% off and free shipping by using the code REF. Your ladies will appreciate you. Now back to Trev, Stoner, and my Manscaped man, Nathan.
My man Stoner wanted to continue arguing with me, and I'm just trying to do a segue. into this next topic here, which is Ron Rivera again opening up and saying things that we're all getting, not we, but I mean, the fans are kind of getting riled up. National media is getting up there. Ron Rivera admitted that he wasn't aware of how good Sam Howell was throughout the 2022 season, where he would have started him sooner, according to Albert Breer. Rivera recalled talking to his wife, all we effing talked about was the quarterback. I kept saying F. If I would have known this, I would have played him sooner.
I think Pat McAfee said it best when he said Ron is using his inside voice outside. Why is he saying these things? It just opens him up to scrutiny. Why keep that stuff to yourself? Just he constantly sticks his foot in his mouth and it makes national news. And we all got to sit here and defend Ron because he's our guy. But I will defend him in this way. We have to get rid of this narrative, this one particular narrative, which is that Ron drafted Sam Howell to be the quarterback of the future. He didn't do that. He drafted him as an afterthought. It was 5th round. He moved up into the 5th round because Sam Howell is still available. Let's take a flyer on this guy. He didn't say Sam Howell in the 5th round. That's the future of the Washington Commanders. He didn't say that. You know it. I know it. Everybody knows it. He took a flyer on a kid.
It probably wasn't even all him. It was probably Marty getting involved as well.
Yeah.
As we've seen those draft videos, and there's a little bit more collaboration. And Ron obviously has a strong say in the roster, but Marty probably was just like, hey, we got this QB. We think that this could be a guy we could develop. Let's see what we got there.
But there was no problem not knowing that that entire year. He had Carson Wentz. He's paying Carson Wentz $28 million. He had to see if Carson Wentz was the guy. Every day in practice, Sam Howell was an afterthought. They didn't even realize he was sitting out there running the scout team or doing whatever he was supposed to do as the 3rd team quarterback. So I don't blame him for that. He didn't realize it. Heck, he even got to game 18 or game 17, week 18, whatever it was. He wasn't even going to play Sam because he barely even knew he was on the team. And then somebody was like, maybe we should give this kid a shot. And they did. And then he was like, oh, maybe we got something here. But I don't blame him for not knowing what they had in him the entire year.
I don't know that I am going to give him that that leeway, Stoner. I feel like his job as the head coach is to kind of have a gauge on his players. And if you know that this team is lacking quality quarterback play, which you do, he quarterback was one of his all-timers last season. Was him just like, what's the difference between you and the other teams? Quarterback, right? He said that. And he's saying that he talked with his wife and with others about quarterback. How is it not brought up that a guy that you kept on the 53, mind you, not a practice squad guy.
I don't remember that, but if you say so.
A 53 guy.
I don't know if he was a 53 guy.
He was a 53 guy.
He was a 53 guy when Carson got hurt and he had to be the backup.
Someone fact check me here. Gus Bus isn't here to fact check me. Someone else is going to have to fact check
I don't think he was on the 53. I think he was a practice squad.
Pretty sure he was 53. But anyways,
the point being is even if he's running your scout team, you have coaches that are there. Why isn't the quarterback room talking to you about like, hey, the quarterback's coach? Why is Scott Turner not stepping in and going, hey, because Scott Turner should have known this, right? He runs the offense. Is he only focused on the ones? You have to know your roster up and down. And if you can't, which I will not blame any coach for not necessarily knowing. So I agree with you there, right? Ron Rivera probably doesn't need to know the Castro Fields is having a great day on the practice squad, right? But somebody in that organization should have been able to go to the next guy up
who then could go to the next guy up and be like, hey, this guy can sling the ball.
Yeah.
And for you not to know that guy, or if you keep asking the question, Stoner, which is what he is saying that he did, right? He keeps asking himself the question, is this like, what are we going to do at quarterback? What are we going to do? Like, I have a guy in Carson Wentz who I can't trust throw out there because he just is not good anymore, right?
Yeah.
And I like Taylor Heineke, who's but I've been trying to get rid of him since the day he came in, and I just don't really have a better option. When you have a guy on your roster, like it's like, why not try him out? We've seen other teams do that. I get that he was, they were in the playoff hunt, and it's a big risk to go to a fifth round rookie,
right?
Playoff hunt. But the guy's not Riverboat Ron for no reason.
Yeah.
Why not take that gamble when you have two guys on the roster who could not do it? That's my thing with the hindsight here.
Right.
If we can move away from the hindsight talk as far as that's concerned, just because I want to talk about a little bit more about, as we're nearing 2 hours here, more about him continually to open up and say things that are not necessarily taken well from national media and everything. Cody, earlier I mentioned I was going to share his comment section because I thought this was a great comment from Cody here. He said, if we think that Ron Rivera says off the wall things right now, just imagine when we get the in-season Hard Knocks. And we're all of that. I thought that was especially astute because it is. I mean, we're going to get behind the scenes. Now, what I think we're going to see, I think we're all going to fall in love with Ron Rivera if we get an in-season Hard Knock. Right?
Yes, agreed.
We're just going to fall in love with him. There's a reason why players want to play for him. Okay. I don't think he is a bad coach. I think that he has good intentions with what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
I do not think, as Allison had put up there, that that he's looking for attention.
No, definitely not.
I just think that he doesn't necessarily think things through, right?
Yeah.
He is a very in the moment guy.
It's very similar to when he made that comment about EB earlier in training camp about some guys had come up to him to talk about EB being too hard on the team, on the offense. Again, he was using his inside voice outside. He was saying things that's supposed to stay within the locker room, and he was letting it out to the media. And he doesn't do it for attention. He does it because he just doesn't kind of realize, because he is too honest, because he is a stand-up guy. So he wants to be open and honest. But those are the types of things you shouldn't tell anybody. You shouldn't have told Albert Briere that you didn't realize Sam Howell was that good. That just makes you look like a buffoon. And it just opens you up to a lot of criticism. But at this point now, credit to him that he did listen to people when they told him to play Sam Howell in that final game. And he did go into the offseason and say and look at Sam and study him and all that. But I do give him a pass a little bit, but you're right. He doesn't get a full pass because that's his job to know what's going on, regardless of if he's the third string quarterback or he's the number one guy. You should know that.
Fair enough. I think that this is a very silly, personally, I think this is a very silly thing to talk about.
Yeah.
I think that this stoked the fire for the Fire Ron crowd, and I've seen at least one hashtag retire Ron Rivera.
Yeah.
There's this notion that Eric Bieniemy is going to be the head coach next year, and that might be. I just don't see an avenue for that Stoner. Because if this team is good, why are you firing the coach that took you there?
Right.
If the team is bad, then likely Sam Howell's bad and this offense isn't good. So why are you hiring the coach for that and not just starting fresh? So I just don't, I get the excitement behind it. I get why they think that. And I think, there's a lot of smart people who believe that. I just don't necessarily see that avenue. But I just hate seeing this is a time right now, Stoner, as we're a week and a half away from Washington taking on the Arizona Cardinals, that we should have harmony. I mean, we got a sold out stadium that's going to be filled with Burgundy and Gold, standing room only. And people are asking already for us to fire our head coach.
I know that's kind of weird, but that'll all go away. Well, again, like you said, once week 1 starts, and then after you win week 1, which they're going to win week 1 fairly easily. But when they start off 1-3, because they're probably going to lose those next 3 games, you've got
that's my trombone.
You've got
Denver strikes again.
You get Denver, Buffalo, and the Eagles are your next 3 games. Then you're going to start hearing that crowd again. But I believe they right the ship, somewhere through, like Ron loves to do, somewhere in the middle of the year, they'll make a run and finish over 500. But yeah, it'll go away after a little while, and then it'll come back again when they lose a couple.
Yeah. Right now, we shouldn't be saying it. We should be on to Arizona, which next week we will certainly talk about that. We bring you content every day of the week, though, so make sure you stay in tune on our YouTube channel. Of course, you can find us on audio platforms as well, because we are on the Believe Network. Wherever you're at, make sure that you are subbed up, that you make that listen, make that view, as every listen and view counts. We'll be back live next week, 7:30 Eastern, here on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. But until next time.
We didn't get that $5.
Yeah, I never did do that. Be a fan.